Hi everyone, welcome to the Quantum Bridge again. We have Charlotte with us again. Last time it was her first, and she's come back to join us again.
You
You've
say
been
you glum the
upgraded,
bunch.
Charlotte, to a returning guest. I mean, there's no prizes, unfortunately, but it's just a glory, you know. So welcome back.
It's an honor. Actually, no, thank you so much for inviting me back again. I really enjoyed the first one. It's nice to be able to talk about the subjects I think that we're all really concerned about and do a little bit of a deep dive if we can.
Fantastic. So a bit of a, I'll try not to put too much of a spoiler, but I'm only going to give you about 15 minutes to do this maybe, and then after that we might fine you for any minute over that. So anyway,
What a great concept.
Yeah, actually, we've now decided it's good. So,
Yeah.
Anyway,
What
Charlotte,
are we talking about today?
welcome. Yes, Gary has done he's given a spoiler already. I'm going to pass it across to you. Actually, if you don't mind, first again, just because some people may not have watched your previous iteration with ourselves, it'd be lovely just to give a quick bit of background, and then we can try and jump into the territory we'd like to cover today.
Indeed. So my name's Charlotte Gracias. I am one of the co-founders of the Together Association. We've been in existence for almost 2 years. Other than that, I work for the NHS, got a bit of a background in campaigning and activism. When COVID came, I think I was really, like a lot of other people, really angry and concerned and started tweeting and going to protests and stuff like that. Lucky enough to meet the people I met, to be part of Together, to meet Gary and Casper and a whole host of other people where I can talk about the things that we're all concerned about and be part of some really big campaigns that hopefully we can win.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, now in terms of a topic today, we've all been under this sort of pressure cooker type scenario for the last few years, whether people have noticed it particularly, have been utterly traumatized by it, or have been somewhere in between those two poles. I'm keen to understand what are the next things coming down the line, and how can we, rather than being overly reactionary to this and move into the fear space from which, and a lot of the other podcasts we're doing are showing this actually, that you can't make the sort of decisions that you'd otherwise make when you're pushed into that. So what's happening, but how are people responding, and how might we all respond in a way that's positive, that moves us all forward? Before I go into that anymore, Charlotte, love to talk about the whole idea of sort of 15-minute cities with you and to get your thoughts on that. But I just wanted to frame this in a way that we're not being fearful or reactionary, but obviously there are views about why this might not always be the most beautiful direction that we're headed in. So Charlotte, over to you for some thoughts and reflections on that.
So I only found out recently that the concept of a 15-minute city was tried in the Soviet Union and failed apparently. And then it was coined by a guy who does, I think, town planning, or an architect. His name's Carlos Moreno, in 2016. And then in 2020, the mayor of Paris, and this was interesting, in February 2020, she had the concept of a 15-minute city. So this was before the lockdown. And then I think they realized in Paris that during lockdown, people were sticking quite close to home. So it was a perfect time for them to go full steam ahead. 15-minute city is great. Well, the thing is, people were only sticking close to home because they weren't allowed to travel very far because there were so many restrictions. So it's kind of a perverse sort of sense of doing the right thing. And then, it was really interesting in 2020, cities all over the world were pushing these type of restrictions. Over in the UK, the government launched something called the Active Travel Fund, which then funded the LTNs, the low traffic neighborhoods. Those started to be implemented in 2020 when we were all locked down. So people didn't really understand, and a lot of people thought it was some kind of social distancing thing, and actually it was sort of social distancing. So a lot of this has been by stealth. So the idea of a 15-minute city sounds lovely. Everything you need within 15 minutes walk or bicycle. And for most people, especially if the elderly, the disabled, if you're a parent with young children, sounds great. 15 minutes to the supermarket, to the GP, to the chemist, to the hospital, the bank, the post office. The reality is, banks are closing, GP surgeries are not opening, local hospitals are closing, so you have to go further away. So the infrastructure currently isn't there to support this ideal, this utopian dream that they've got of 15-minute cities. But it's interesting, there's a lot of history around this being kind of wrapped up in the kind of anti-car, sort of the war on cars, I think they call it. So this goes back, I think we'll talk about London and the UK. Ken Livingstone, the mayor of London, formed an organisation called the C20, I think it was 2005. That then merged with the Clinton Climate Initiative in 2006, which, says quite a lot. Move forward to what we've got now as C40, which is chaired by Sadiq Khan. That represents some of the biggest cities in the world. So you've got all these city mayors pushing a very similar ideology at the same time. And that in itself ought to concern people in the same way that COVID restrictions are pushed at the same time. If it was about a particular city and the emissions, you could understand it. For example, London is 90th in the league table of admissions. So we're actually quite a clean city compared to some other cities in the world. So it begs the question, why would you want to reduce the traffic in London? So, they're talking about 15-minute cities in London. I think it's going to be unworkable. So Oxford was one of the first to try and implement that. So they pushed out a pilot, I think in November 2022, which caused quite a stir. It's really ignited the residents. The bottom line is, it's fine if you've got everything on your doorstep, and that would be great. We haven't got that. Secondly, it stops you traveling further than you would normally. So there's restrictions on movement in terms of you're only allowed a certain amount of visits within a year, I think, and then there's fines and stuff like that. So if it was about creating a happier, cleaner environment where people feel sort of safe and they have everything they need, why would you need to restrict their movement? What's wrong with the occasional, trip? But the point is, most people drive. They drive to work, they drive to hospitals, they drive to take their kids to school, they drive to see relatives. We'd all like to drive less, simply because sometimes it's a hassle because you're sitting in traffic. But at the same time, we all want the freedom to drive when we want to drive. And most people don't drive for the hell of it. They drive because they want to go somewhere, or they have to go somewhere. So, this is all kind of wrapped up in control for the public sector. I think this is largely about control. For the private sector, who are involved in things like setting up cameras and all the companies associated with the actual traffic management schemes, huge profits are being made. And I was talking to the guy who's leading the campaign in Thetford. I don't know whether you've seen him, Mike Ball. There was that video that went viral, and one of their councillors is married to a guy who runs a company that is profiting from the traffic management scheme in the area. Now, that in itself is wrong. So all over the country, I'm hearing stories about local councillors who have conflicts of interest in companies that are, installing the cameras that will be monitoring people. And there again, people should be asking the question, it's fine to have all these amenities locally, but why do you need to monitor us? Why do we need to be surveilled so much? The amount of surveillance, the amount of cameras, in particular in London, I don't know what it's like in Oxford, but it's probably one of the most surveilled cities in the world. There's cameras.
Yeah, I think it definitely is. Yeah.
Yeah. So people need to really start asking questions about how these are funded, who's benefiting, why we need to be restricted, why they're finding us, and why we need to be monitored. There was a guy that did a video, I forget his name now, but he sort of suggested that we all put in FOIs to councils, because apparently you're allowed to ask for the data subject access request. So wherever you've been caught on camera, you're allowed to ask for that piece of film and ask them why they're collecting it. And he said, imagine if thousands of us did that to the councils, you'd tie them up in knots. And it's a really, really good idea to do that. So yeah, that's in a nutshell, I think, where we are with
it's that sort of positive, forward-thinking action that is, you know, does something that has a massive effect, but is using the system that's being given to us. And just the more people educate themselves, the more knowledge generally there is amongst us, amongst the people, the more on all of these things we can push back and win. You know, pushing back is one thing, and it's lovely to do that, but it's pushing back with the desired outcome, that we go about our lives as we want to go about our lives. We understand that there are all sorts of things acting on us at the moment, and that there are issues around the environment. Of course there are. You know, there are people on the planet, and we make things and we do things and we move around and whatever, and that's understandable. But that there should be this open dialogue about all the different ways of dealing with this. You know, whether that is a movement more towards hydrogen, for example. You know, there's a massive push at the moment, obviously, for electric vehicles. And sort of that seems to be understandable, because it's like, yeah, less emissions and so on, but less emissions at point of use, not necessarily less emissions, or not necessarily less damaging for the world. So there are all of these other things at play, but we're given this very myopic view of the world. And just to back up for a second, Charlotte, I think that I heard that person who was speaking in Glastonbury
Sandy Adams,
now. Yeah, that was an incredible piece of relaying information with a lot of obviously a lot of passion, but also managing to get that across is not easy. And a lot of what she was saying was, you know, this stuff goes back to the early 1990s, that this stuff is also not coming from countries or sovereign nations to their populaces. This is coming top down from something that is global. Right? And decision makers who have got together in various bodies across various continents and countries to make decisions that then filter down. And I think a lot of the stuff that gets thrown at us is, oh, well, you know, your conspiracy theories, there can't be just a small number of people making decisions for the whole planet. How could that work? Well, it can work actually very easily, because you only need a few people making those decisions if they run all of the key players, industries, and so on. And everything has to filter down. It's just like in a company where you've got that pyramidal structure, where, of course, at the top, you've got somebody, usually one person, saying really how it all goes, and then the other people relaying that message down. It's exactly the same. It's just another larger pyramid structure. So just to come back to everything that you're talking about, this is not so much about just to push back against a local council, for example, and whatever. They may well not understand what's happening or the full ramifications. I think it's more, the onus is on us to educate them and push back up the system again, but to know that this didn't come from our local councils in the UK, for example. This has come and been directed from a long time back, and from a significantly higher level that perhaps we can't even see, actually. So I don't know how you relate to that, Charlotte, but that I just think the context is needed.
Yeah, I think it's that question. You want to sow the seed in people's minds, whether that be people in your local area or your local councillors, who may well believe that all these traffic reduction restrictions are a good thing because they've been sold the environmental dream, you know, of us all living in a kind of purified air utopia. But when you explain the fact that how, you know, ask the question, why are all these councils doing it at the same time? So in the UK, you've got something called UK 100, where 100 councils have all signed up to do this. You've got C40 chaired by Sadiq Khan. Why are all councils doing everything at the same time? Why are they not focusing on local issues? So that would be pertinent to the local people. You know, why are you doing something that council's doing? Why aren't you repairing the potholes in the road, or doing this for us, or, you know, investing in a community centre? So people need to start asking those sort of questions, even if they don't believe that there is a group of people, you know, sort of telling world leaders and people in, you know, large organisations what to do. At a very local level, they should just be asking those questions and understanding, as you say, the Sandy Adams explained in Glastonbury, that a lot of this was started in the 90s, maybe before that. So if we had a problem in the 90s, why didn't they start this then? Why have they waited? What, you know, what's been going on? So people just need to ask questions. And I guess it's up to us all of us who are a little bit more knowledgeable to share information with people. So I mean, I've learned quite a lot about 15-minute cities and the history. So I'm going to now share that with people so that they understand that there's a little bit of an agenda behind there, and just so they could question. But I think what we're trying to do, especially with Together, is just to get people to come together, to form groups, to question the council. What they did in Thetford was brilliant. You know, they were very well prepared. They had a list of questions for the council. They've asked them to be accountable and transparent. So that's all you need to do. You know, did you consult with us? Did you prepare? Can we see the scientific evidence to support the measures that you're introducing? Did you allow us to question the evidence? So that all those kind of things, you know, you slow down the process and you put them in a position where they have to be accountable to the local people. So there's actually quite a lot that people can do.
Yeah, I think as well, it's touching a bit on what Casper said. Sometimes, you know, maybe some ideas are okay. Like you say, you know, we're going to regenerate an area. You know, like you say, you know, that things are going to be more local for you. And you know, sometimes you say, oh, okay, that's a nice idea, but where's this other bit come from that I'm going to get fined if I leave it? I mean, how do these go? You know, so, and the same with like emissions and things like that. So they say, we want to cut down on that. You say, yeah, I get that. Yeah. Why all the cameras and the fines and the tickets? You know, I mean, aren't we looking at the tech that we can, you know, and I think there's something to look at there. You know, what technology is allowed to come through, you know, to keep certain parties happy and financed, if you like, because there is a lot of other technology, like you know, we've seen recently, like with hydrogen and things like that, that you know might be a lot better. You know?
There is. I spoke to someone yesterday who actually said that they come across a company that produced, I think it's called a catalyst, that could halve emissions immediately, but they were kind of like, you know, no one was interested because obviously it would mean that the electric car companies would lose a lot of money. So yeah, you're right. There's hydrogen. There's all kinds of ways of powering cars. But if it really was about emissions, and people should ask these questions, shouldn't we be looking at all those things?
Exactly. Yeah, what are the best solutions? Let's put them all on the table and have a look at it. But you know, you'd have to do that without vested interests. There's always something in the way. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is just looking at energy in general. I mean, there's all this push towards wind, whether it be nuclear, all of these other aspects, you know, moving away from coal, moving away from the internal combustion engine. I mean, the truth is with the internal combustion engine, I mean, I'm not going to give the figures around this, but the internal combustion engine now, and this is even going for diesel as well as petrol cars, we're talking about very, very low emissions, right? And certainly a lot of cars that have been made over the last 10 years and certainly the last 4 or 5 years, you know, these emissions are so incredibly low now. They're Euro 6 compliant and all of these things. But you're still looking at basically what it seems that this is going towards to me. And again, this is a bit of sort of future thinking. It might not be here right now, but it's like all of these cars and so on. So you're going to say, well, effectively, they can't really be used. Then they have to be turned electric. But then actually, no, look, it's still difficult to produce enough energy the way that we're doing it, these new ways, renewable ways. So actually, we'd rather you don't really use your car. Then your car's going to be self-driving and it's going to tell you you can't go out today because you haven't hit the right credit scores or you said the wrong things and whatever. So effectively, it does become, at the end of that process, or it could become, I should say that, it could become, effectively you're imprisoned in your car. Your car locks the doors and waits for somebody to turn up to say, right, you're off. You know, so just it's worth thinking about, where does this go? You know, first of all, you've got to get rid of all these cars that are recent, and that it costs a lot in terms of energy to produce the cars, not just power them, but to produce them in the first place. So you've got all these cars. Then it's going to be, can we retrofit these cars? Then it's going to be the next stage about that. Where does it end? So I think people it's worth them thinking about. There's some lovely ideas here. And that's, I think, the tricky bit about this is they get you with the fact that, of course, we should all be looking for cleaner air, cleaner water, better food, all of these things. But all we're saying is there might be some better options to get us there. Is
Yeah.
that not really what this whole
Yeah, this is,
wider conversation is about?
and it's about educating the public to just ask those questions. You know, for example, if tomorrow, you know, I'm thinking in particular of the ULEZ extension, if everyone sold all their old cars and bought electric cars tomorrow, no one would pay any congestion charges or ULEZ. You know, then what would he do? You know, so if that's the direction he wants to go in, you've got to say to people, well, so imagine that we all did this, then he'd make no money. So then he would have to charge all the people with the electric cars. So like you said, it goes on and on and on, and it never really stops, because this is, all of it's a money grab, you know, and I think people need to realize that. Local services are suffering. Businesses are closing because of the various traffic reduction schemes. Oxford businesses are being really badly affected by the 15-minute city. So
and we know what sort of businesses are being most affected. Those are the smaller, more independent, that evidently are meant to be encouraged, right? The whole idea of there's more diversity of choice, people can start their own businesses, you can become sovereign in that sense that you're, you know, producing something good for the community and you're being rewarded, and that all feeds back. And then suddenly, who actually can benefit from this? Large corporations that can weather this storm. That's
all the online retailers.
You know,
you know, we know this, where this is going. We close all the small businesses. You can't drive, so everything has to come to you by an electric vehicle. Amazon will be, you know, that kind of company will be owning everything. Is that the future that we want? Of course not.
Or it's not able to come to you. You know, you haven't done the right things this week or this month, and actually now you can only have X and Y rather than that whole plethora of things. Or actually this week you're not going to be eating, you know, because you did something or said something that didn't ally with this overarching, on one hand, utopian vision, on the other hand, dystopian vision. Again, all of this is about how you view it. And yeah, I think the way you painted it, and also doing it so calmly as well, Charlotte, because actually on one level it's massively worrying. On another level, this is an amazing opportunity for us all to be empowered to start engaging with these systems that most of us, myself included, haven't engaged with. And that is partly why this has moved in the direction it has. Because we haven't taken our own sovereignty and our own power and held people accountable, they've had 20, 30, 50, 100 years of doing basically what they want, right? And we make a choice. We can either decide that actually we're going to go back to sleep and decide whatever happens, happens, or we can create another future together.
I think we've definitely all taken our eye off the ball with local councils. You know, for years, there's been a certain kind of person going, you know, moving into sort of local council. You know, I've seen it over the last few months, you know, talking about this. So, you know, people who love control, people who don't seek consent. And, you know, we need that. The beauty of all the campaigns I've seen recently, and meeting people in the protest in Haringey and in Trafalgar Square, people who've never protested before are suddenly like, this is wrong, you know, and like local leaders are emerging, great people, you know, who in all those areas, in Oxford, in Cambridge, in Haringey, who are really passionate, and they are, you know, inspiring their own community. So I think that something really positive is going to come out of this. We're going to see council change and people push back and take control of their own areas.
Yeah. I think the other thing is that certainly Gary and I, and I'm sure you have this feeling on an energetic level, if we can talk like that, but we feel we're going to win this. You know, that the energy and the numbers and actually the intellect on some level is behind us. It's in our favour. But that only matters if the sort of people who haven't bothered until now, and that's fine, I don't blame them. I think most people thought all this stuff would just go away, just another fad that's pushed down on us, but life basically goes on pretty similarly, are gradually realising actually it's not going on like that. And that somebody in their family or one of their friends is taking action, and maybe they're not quite as nuts as they thought.
No, it was interesting. I've got a colleague at work, but we never really discussed any of the stuff I do before. And the subject of the ULEZ came up today, and she said, "Oh yeah, I'm really angry about that. And my brother was at the protest on Saturday, and of course I was there." So there you go. You know, all of a sudden you've got things in common, and people are getting, as you said, I don't like the word waking up too
No,
much.
no, none of us do, but it just
Yeah, you know,
yeah.
they're becoming more engaged, and
Yeah.
I love it. It's great. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I noticed that we're getting close to our allotted time. I think that this may well be worth another go at this because there is quite a lot actually of material here. And also there's a lot happening in the background in terms of actually, as you've picked up on, whether it be Oxford, Thetford, all over the country, we're seeing people taking action. Now, not all of that is maybe the most constructive, but I understand where it's coming from. And some of it is beautifully constructive and is waking other people up, if I to coin a phrase. So maybe, Charlotte, you might consider talking to us again about this. I think there's more to be said.
I'd love to, because actually for Together, this is one of our biggest campaigns, and I've realised that it's affecting everyone, no matter where you are, no matter which part of the UK, which part of London, it's affecting everyone. So yeah, I'd love
And
to
the
come
world,
back and
actually.
and
The
the
great
world,
thing
yeah.
about this is we're talking about something that will affect everybody, but we can all positively affect it and have the outcome that we want. You know, so
Yeah.
the power is in our hands. Anyway, on that note, thank you very much, Charlotte.
Thanks
I
again.
hope
Thank
to see
you,
you again
guys.
soon. And
See you
thank you for
both
doing
soon.
all that research as well and bringing us, you know, some real tangible material today. That was really good of you.
It was helpful to me, but it was my pleasure. Thank you both so much for having me on. Have a
You're
great
welcome.
evening. See you
And
later.
you,
Bye bye.
take care. Bye-bye.